Hello and welcome to another episode of Atomic Vinyl Reviews. And today we're doing part 2 of my custom effect parts and sort of diorama bits for Godzilla figures series. So in the first episode, the last episode, we made a simple building. So here we go. It's right here. This little skyscraper here is what we put together in the first episode. It was a fun little project. The video is a lot longer than I anticipated, but again, if you're not filming or whatever, it goes really quickly, and it's a really simple project if you really think about it. So in this episode, I was originally going to do a destroyed building for the second episode, is what I was sort of planning, like a damaged building, kind of like this one or something like that, but. What happened is I wasn't planning on filming one of these today, but I was working on a model kit T-Rex. It's back there, that T-Rex, but what I did with that was I filled it with plaster, and I had a little tub where I mixed the plaster where I had a lot left over, and I was about to chuck it when an idea came into my mind, and I'm like, I can use this to demonstrate how you make rubble. So, I'll just cut back with that little box because I forgot to have it on hand. So, here's a little box of, typical plaster bits that you get if you're, mixing up some plaster of Paris and then you just didn't use it all, so then you end up with a whole bunch of this stuff in whatever mixing container you're using, and, one side is like really... I'm not sure if it'll go in focus because it's very white, but oh, that's not bad actually. My camera was acting up earlier today when I was filming other stuff, but now it's good, kind of. Ignore my nail polish, by the way, as my girlfriend was just playing around painting my nails. But if you can see there, it's got that like really smooth, nice side. And the thing is, when you crush this stuff up, especially if you got the really thin little bits like this, and then you can crush this stuff up, it acts really well as like a model rubble. So I'm going to show you a couple of other things that you would mix in with this to make a perfect rubble. Because what we're going to be doing today, I should have actually said, is we are building a display base for Godzilla and Kaiju figures, or just like a model city if that's just what you want for whatever reason. So particularly I'm doing this for Monster Arts figures, and again, not that scale really matters in this episode as much, because it's kind of just rubble mostly, and like street shapes, and I'm going to be doing some landscape and stuff like that, but it's more scale more applies to buildings and roads, which we are using roads today, and I'll take you through that in a little bit. But I make my buildings to scale with 50-meter scale Godzillas in like 6-inch or like 15-centimeter figures, basically. So like this figure, he was this Godzilla is like about 6 inches tall, but in the movie he measured 50 meters, and that way the buildings measure up better with him. But if you're using like a Heisei Godzilla or like the legendary Godzilla where they're like 100 meters or thereabouts, the details in the buildings are gonna look a little too big. But it doesn't really matter, to be honest, if you don't really care about that. But that's just a little point about the last video. But if I'm just gonna draw your attention down to this table here, where I have an example city. So you'd have seen this in the last episode in some photos, and I've been posting a couple of these photos up on the Atomic Vinyl Reviews Facebook page, so I definitely recommend checking that out. And this is basically what we're aiming to get with this series. So if you learned from the first episode and how to just make the buildings, now you'll be able to make a really nice display base to go with them. And then you can see you can put your Godzilla in that, and that is just if I do say so myself, that is a great little display piece. Obviously, I usually have it with a lot of other buildings and stuff, just to create even more of a space. But again, you can make these to any scale you want, and as many of them as you want, and any sort of detail in the buildings you want, really. So I like to have all the buildings to be not attached to it, except for I have a little destroyed bit here, which is, but you don't really need that, to be honest. I'd actually prefer if I could move this destroyed building around. But what I'm going to do now, actually, before I do that, I'm going to show you my second little display base, which is an earlier one I tried out, which has more of an organic look, like a landscape. So you can see here it's got a nice landscape with trees and like a dirt road and, you know, dirt and you could put grass there, and it's also got a little concrete area. So, what did I make these out of? Basically, you can make these out of just about anything that fits your needs, basically. And that's going to be a recurring theme in this series, because a lot of this stuff is very improvised. But if you follow a few little tips, it'll really help bring life to your creations. So there's all the buildings and little details taken off, and what we're left with here is the pure display base. And okay, there's a little bit of more rubble, like I have this little destroyed building chunk, which is a cool little bit. I only made like the one, but I'm planning on doing a video making these as well, because this is a really good bit to add to the rubble. Well, just get rid of those. But what we have is the pure display base. As you can see, it's got damaged roads and a blank concrete space, as well as areas of road and ground that has been clearly damaged. So it's great for setting up a battle scene. And hopefully I can give you guys a nice close-up of that damage there, and the camera would be so kind as to actually focus on this image here, you really get a sense of that detail, especially in this area. And this is what we're going to be focusing on making in this episode. Well, one of the elements. I'm probably going to, I don't know if I'll do this in parts, or whether I'm going to do it in like one big episode about making a display base, because it's going to have different elements. It's going to have a destroyed elements like this with the rubble, which is probably what I'll be focusing on in this episode if I do split it up into episodes. And it's going to have, you know, the roads and everything. That's just sort of the basic groundwork that I'm definitely going to be focusing on in this episode as well. And I'm also going to be installing little areas of natural scenery. For stuff like this with the scenery, I have some really cool tips for this. But one thing that you can do is just look up lots of videos about how to do display scenery for model trains and stuff like that, because they have some really good informative videos about model trains. There's like a whole society of people doing that stuff. So there's lots and lots of literature and videos and whatever to go into to figure out how to do these bits effectively, though I've gone through how to do it as effectively as possible for as cheap as possible, which is something that I strongly advocate you look into, because if you just follow a lot of the stuff that those train videos say and do, a lot of them don't really focus on making it cheap or affordable. They just basically pretty much make it as expensive as possible and buy all the brand name crap and whatnot. But I make it out of like DIY materials, and you can get really good results if you know what you're doing. So so enough about that. Let's get into the build. So okay, so I've got pretty much everything, all the main stuff that you'll need set up to show you guys. So let's just go through it all. So the first thing that you're definitely going to need is something to build your display on. The harder this, I recommend like a bit of plywood or something like that would be the best. Today I'm actually using this. The reason I'm using this is both just because I have it on hand, and this is probably going to be the easiest thing for you guys to get. And this is a cake base. So basically you would have, you can buy these in like random cheap stores. This was padded silver on both sides, but I tore one side off. ages ago just to get this side rough. You're not going to get the best results on this, but I just figured I'll use it because it's what I've got on hand. You could also use maybe foam board or a thick layer of cork, which is what I did with this thing, or just find any like strong flat surface. I'm not even sure what this was. I found this somewhere. It's like a weird, really hard, very firm, kind of like wooden placemat. It's not really wooden, but it's like that fiberboard material, and it's got like this on the back, and I just used this side. It just had like a almost like a plywoody type cork-ish sort of texture on this side, which I worked on. So you know, the less cardboard won't be very good, and I know I am using cardboard today, but just do as I say, not as I do, basically. So the stronger your surface, the better results you'll have, because stuff like this will curl and it will bend. So I know it's gonna not be very good, but hell, I'm just gonna use it anyway. One thing which I recommend is you print off some road textures. Now, most of these I'm not going to use, but this one in particular is the most important one. I found, like, I designed a couple of these other ones that are here, but I only ended up really using this one in the final project when I was making the one that I was showing you earlier, which is this one. So I printed these on like I think it was like 6 by 8 inch sheets of glossy print. If you go to the link in the description, it'll link you to my Atomic Vinyl Reviews Facebook page, and there will be all the photos. Again, go to the I'm going to put it up on screen now. It's a the dioramas and custom effect parts for Godzilla figures and Kaiju figures group. Long name, I know, but really join up to that group on Facebook if you're interested in this stuff. I also had those links in the first video. It's a very useful place to get info about this stuff, and just share it and have fun there, of course. So yeah, that's where you'll be able to find the prints that I made, and then just print them out at like your local printery. I went to Office Works here in Brisbane, and there you can get these glossy prints. So they're the largest size of glossy prints. They're about half the size of an A4 sheet of paper. If you print them out on A4, you'll probably get very different sized roads. So I don't know. I don't know how to help with that at the moment, because I kind of made it into this scale. So I recommend getting lots of thin bits of cardboard. Again, you can do this any way you like, but this is the way I'm going to do it. So this is just, I don't know what this is from. It's just really thin cardboard. You can get them from like snack boxes, stuff like that, like from a box of shapes, or, you know, like tuna can boxes. These are used for making buildings, but it's the same flat, very thin cardboard that's really easy to get from any packaging. And the reason we're using this is it's going to be used as the flat section of the concrete where your buildings sit on, and I'll explain that in a bit when we get started. But those are your main bits to getting like just a simple display base and road with roads going. But if you want to really get into it and do like the damage stuff, which is what we're looking at today, I'm going to need some other stuff. So like I said, the bits of crushed plaster is really good, and something else that you might not think of that's really good is fly mesh. So this stuff that you have on windows, and it seems odd, but I'll explain later. And other really good things, sand. You can use sand. I don't overly recommend sand anymore, because this is my very best secret that I came up with. I think this is my best idea for just making this kind of stuff, and that is coffee grounds. Because if you drink coffee, or you know somebody who does, you know that there's a lot of the stuff that's left wasted after you use it, basically, if you you know, make coffee in that way. And what I do is I dry it out, I put it in a container, leave it out in the sun after it's used. Then I get a big batch, I put it in this bag, and with I have some silica gel packs just to make sure it's dry and there's nothing bad gonna happen. But this is a really, really good just matter to make fake dirt, fake grass, fake rubble, just the texturing to mix into stuff and to glue onto surfaces, and just as a fake dirt, so you don't have to go out and use random actual dirt. And it's nice because it smells like coffee and it's all very even, and you can make a very controlled, nice surface. And if you're a bit skeptical, then this, if it would focus, this dirt here, that's just ground coffee over like a textured surface, and then it's been painted. So that's pretty much what this is, and it's a great texturing, and it's not going to damage your figures because it's nice and soft. Because the idea is you don't want to get like an actual dirt surface if at all possible, because some of those rocky shards, and that's why I'm not too fond of sand, can be a bit abrasive. And this is going to be one of your best friends. This is cork. So bits of cork look amazing when you tear them apart and paint them gray and like do some nice dry brushing. They look amazing as broken rubble from buildings or cracked ground or anything like that, or just rocky sort of surfaces. So if you can get like an old cork board and just tear off the cork and use that, or if you just have another way of getting some flat sheets of cork to tear up and use in your dioramas, I highly recommend it. And like I said, you can even use a thick bit of cork for the base. Cork can be a little expensive, but like I said, there are ways of finding it pretty cheaply if you find some discount stores with some cork boards or stuff like that. So that's really recommended. And so all those like rubble materials, like the plaster and the fly mesh, which is the odd one, and like you can even use dried eggshells and crumbled eggshells and stuff like that. If you get all that stuff with the coffee grounds and those, and you kind of just crush it all up, tear tiny bits, cut little tiny bits and tear them off the fly mesh, you kind of get a substance that looks something like this. And essentially what that has in it, whoops, losing bits, is that has a lot of crushed plaster. It has bits of like matchsticks broken up in it as well. It has bits of torn cork. It has bits of the fly mesh in there, and the fly mesh is there to look like if you have like a big skyscraper and it like crumbles, it has all those metal meshing inside the concrete that sort of is like the iron support structure inside the concrete pillars and stuff. That's what that kind of looks like. And what we do with this stuff is, this is like a dry sort of mix, and if we want to make a textured surface, we mix this stuff with something that's going to bind it and hold it to our piece. And there's a couple of ways of doing that. You could use just paint and glue, but you're not going to get like the best effect. You could even like do different grades of this stuff and like make it really mushed into like a something like gap filler, which is what I'm going to show you, which I showed you in the last episode. Mine's in a salsa jar, but normally people don't have it in salsa jars. No, but this is like the best way I found for using it in models. Is normally comes in like a thin cylinder with like a cone tip that you use in like a metal gap filler gun. If you're not sure what it is, just Google gap filler. So this is just acrylic gap filler for like, you know, fixing houses and stuff like that. And this stuff is very cheap. If you just go to your local hardware store and get like the cheapest one, you can get like enough to fill a salsa jar for like $3 or $4. And this stuff's going to last you forever, and it's going to be your best friend when making this sort of stuff. And what you do is basically you get a container kind of like this one, Like if you or had the shards of this stuff, you literally just smash them. You break them up. Probably use a hammer or something like that. Put them in a little bag and hammer it, and then you'll get like the nice shards. And that's gonna when it's in the rubble, it's gonna look like, you know, actual bits of concrete and stuff because it has that nice smooth surface and those cool shards. So, you know, you can sprinkle that stuff into your rubble mix. And then you'd mix it in with the paste and some paint. And then once it's all, you know, set, you can dry brush that with, you know, you can paint it black. Then you dry brush it with various colors and various grays and browns. You get an amazing look, especially if you also add some extra bits of cork in there and layer it up and add all sorts of like then you put coffee grounds around it like dirt. You get this basically. Like, it looks really bad when it's out of focus, but when it's in focus and in person, it looks like a really good effect, like you saw in some of those photos. So you can be really creative with the way you arrange this stuff, and it's a lot of fun. So I basically explained all of it, but shown not too much. So let's get started on our build. Alright, so for starting off our build, this is all you're going to need for the first step. So we have our plain base, and now what you're going to have to do is you need to plan out what you want to have arranged here. So I'm kind of thinking like, I don't like it to be, I like it on an angle, because that way it looks a little more dynamic when you have it posed. So I'm thinking I can make something that would join up with this base if I wanted it to, and that's a cool way of working. So kind of trying to think what's the best way to arrange this. So I'm thinking probably this way would look cool, just roughly drawing out where I want stuff. So for now the road is going to go across this way. I'm thinking about whether to add a turn in the road. I'm not sure I have quite enough road to actually make one. But I guess it would look more interesting if there was something like that. So this bit's going to be the road. Just to make it a little more easier to see for both you and me, because I made a little bit of a mess of this. That turn there, it could be a little tricky to make with the photos, but you can match it up if you put a little work into it. So you could also, you know, I've also printed like pathway textures that you could use at the end if you want and whatever. I haven't used this yet, and I probably don't really know if I will. Don't really need it, but it's there. And some like ground textures between the road. Again, I didn't really use those because I just like the way it came out just with the cardboard. So speaking of the cardboard, what we do next is basically everywhere that isn't a road, we pave over with this stuff. You could also plan, like, now I could also plan where I want the non-city type stuff to go. So like the park, or the nature part. I'm not really sure where to put it, so somewhere in this corner here, because I'm sort of picturing, like, you could look at it like Godzilla could be standing somewhere like here. You'd have some, you know, buildings and whatnot around here, some random destruction and stuff going on, and then at the back here there would also be like foresty trees and things. So could just basically you could leave those bits plain, and I'm gonna just make it up as I go along. So we'll just see how the cardboard will fit as the smooth ground, and then whatever we don't really have enough cardboard for will become the space for our garden. And another cool thing I'll show you in another episode is these things where you can just make little separate gardens. But again, I'll probably do the foresty and the natural stuff in the next episode. So it'll be a two-parter episode. But for just making the industrial landscape. I kind of like how this has this tear here. That's a good part to start building some destruction from. Now we have a nice bit of cardboard that should, in theory, fit by our road really nicely. So what we're going to do with this is we are just going to glue it down and probably weight it down. And one thing that could look really cool is if you get your Godzilla and you have your first layer of cardboard, you just put his foot down somewhere. Like, say there's this big crack here, so there's this big crack going to be here, so I'm just going to kind of draw around his foot a bit. And we're going to make this look better, obviously, once it's closer to being finished. We're going to decorate this with rubble and stuff. And then you can cut those out, and when you glue those down, there'll be a slight indent there. Again, this is like cracked ground, so it doesn't have to be, you know, a perfect match. And the more rough it looks, probably the better. So that's a little cool thing, another feature that we can add, and then we can add some stuff. Because when we're making like the big holes and explosions in the ground later, they don't entirely have to be above, under the ground, sort of dug in, because we can build up the edges to make them look deeper, but this just adds that little extra bit of dimension. So now we have this kind of a piece, and I'll just show you gluing down the first bit, and like I said, I'll do the rest off camera, because it's going to just be really boring for you guys to watch. And I'm expecting that this piece of cardboard will bend quite a lot. That's why having something heavy on it while it dries will help. So, I have left, excuse me, I have left this under a flat surface and under a lot of pressure overnight, so it was sitting under my coffee table, which I use as a seat. There we go. So, as you can see here, it actually worked out pretty nice. This thing is flatter than when I left it. I mean, it's still bending up a little bit now since I released the pressure, but that helped a lot, keeping it under there. So, it's all taken care of. As you can see, I filled out the rest of this space with these bits of cardboard. And so, for now, we're going to leave the road area blank. We'll put the road on more towards the end after we get pretty much everything else put together and we're getting ready to paint. So what we're going to do now is we're going to bring out that gap filler that I was telling you guys about, and we can start doing all the broken damage and stuff, which is the going to be the highlight of this episode, I think. So here's a gap filler. So we'll do this step first, and then we'll get on to the interesting stuff. But what I like to do once I get this all down is, you see like how we've got little gaps here. Like, I mean, you could use this as like a big crack in the ground, but since it's just like just a point between these two bits of flat ground, I like to smooth that over. So you could use like a paddle pop stick or whatever, but I've got like a little painting implement, and so you can, I'll just show you guys what this stuff is like. So it's like this sort of stuff. So what I'm just gonna do is I'm just gonna spread it into those gaps, and like I said, this is a really good tool for this. I'm just gonna smooth that over. So again, I highly recommend you get gap filler if you're going to be doing a lot of these models. I mean, you could do it without it, but if you're gonna start into doing like rubble and more natural scenery, you really this is like gonna be your best friend. So it's really up to you. So now the interesting bit where we're gonna get to damaging up some of this road here. Well, not the road, but I mean like the area up the side of the road. So what I'm going to start doing is there's going to be, you know, a bunch of damage that goes through this area and kind of comes through into this road here. And the way we're going to go about that is we're going to use our rubble mix. So like I showed you before, you see it's got all those little bits in there. Right now they're all colored like white and gray and eggshell colored and brown and coal colored and all that sort of stuff. So what we're going to do is we're gonna just pour off a bit of this into a little mixing cup. So I'm gonna try and scoop in some of the finer little bits. I got some little pebbles in there and the bits of cork. So you get about, you know, a little bit of that in there. And what we're gonna do is we're essentially just gonna pour a mixture of glue, some PVA glue, just to help bind it. Some PVA glue. We're gonna get some black paint. You don't have to do this step, but I kind of prefer to do this. I prefer to do this step here because if you're gonna paint it later, well, you are gonna paint it later. At least I am. And if you're gonna do that, it really helps if you don't have like a white surface that you're working on, because we're going to be mixing PVA glue and we're going to be mixing some of the gap filler with it. So this is going to really bind it together and make it into a rubble paste. And what else I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a bit of coffee in there. So this is that coffee grounds I was talking about. So you can just see it there. It really is like a really good alternative for buying, because a lot of like if you're into those train models, like I said, and you get like woodland scenics, they have all the like different turfs and different textured ground dirts and stuff, specifically for model making. That stuff's really expensive, and coffee grounds, if you drink coffee, you can get it for free. So I'm gonna, you know, pinch some of that in there, like a nice big pinch. I mean, you can again vary this however you like, but this is just a very chunky, thick paste. And again, whoa, oh dear God. Okay, well that's the rest of my day taken up by vacuuming. Man. But I'll worry about that later. I'm in the middle of a tutorial. So now that we have our paste and it's all falling apart, we can start pasting it on. So basically it's completely up to you how you want to do this. Like I've left a little broken bit here, and I'm kind of gonna spread it, you know, around these like cracked areas and towards the road. And you'll find when this stuff dries, you'll be able to see a lot more of that detail come through, because the both the glue and that gap filler will kind of shrink a bit, and it'll shrink around all the various details you have in here. And do remember, like if you're gonna put buildings around, leave flat spaces for the buildings. Like you could even, if you want to like plan ahead earlier, you could like draw out the flat spaces or whatever. I'm just gonna kind of just leave this space open and these spaces, and I want to build like a park or something around this area anyway. So what I'm gonna do is leave a lot of that area untouched, just to have enough space for those buildings. So I've got most of that down, and I'm gonna start using some cork now. So we're just gonna get a bit of cork and we're just gonna really tear it up and make, like, you could use big flat bits, they probably would work a little better. But just make sure you have a whole bunch of the rough edges of the cork is really the bits that look the best. So, you know, a whole bunch of little bits like that. And what I'm gonna start doing is, if you see this footprint shape here, gonna start putting some glue around it. And now we can kind of just layer it around it fairly loosely. By loosely I mean the bits don't have to be like, you want them to look sort of cracked and kind of messy, because we're going to fill around these a little later. And again, if you don't, I'm really just doing this more to show you guys than to make like the best diorama possible. So again, if you're not too fond of like exactly how it turns out, then remember this is more about the techniques and stuff. And I'm probably gonna actually just grab some more filler. I'm probably gonna maybe even add a little more glue and coffee in this, just to make a very subtle textured paste. So, oh dear God, what did I do? That's such a mess. Okay, grab some of the mess, sprinkle it in. Oh no. Anyway, so you know, this is turning into a nice gray paste. And it's nice and textured, so we can even use this for dirt. Like I use the coffee grounds, like I'll show you this in the next episode when we do landscape scenery, but depending on how this turns out, where it's almost just coffee and this paste, it could be good for just a dirt texture that then dries, and you just, you know, paint it up however you like, brown and such. So what I'm kind of wanting to do with this is I want some of those shards of cork that are looking like you know, looking like little separate squares. I want to kind of go in with this and back them off with some of this stuff, so then they kind of transition out of the ground a little more, and they don't really look like they're just separate squares that have been glued down, but like they're breaking out of the ground, and that this is sort of like all the dust and stuff that's settled on top of them. You can see in this area, I'm planning on having like a split in the road where you can see under the road. And since this texture is also already a bit rough, it can be like sort of the dirt under there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a bit of this fly mesh. So I have like this bit of fly mesh, and what I'm going to do is on the road here, if you can see that, I'm going to just cut like a fairly jagged, like I'm gonna see how wide the road is. It's like about, it's about that wide, give or take. It doesn't have to be exact. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just cut like a really jagged sort of texture out of this, just to make it look a little messy. And then I'm just gonna position it roughly like the two bits. So something kind of like that. I think the break in the road should be about there. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna glue those bits down there. So little bits of it at the end could be sticking up, just as long as the bits at the back here are pressed down nicely. And then I'm gonna reach to the floor where all my coffee went and sprinkle a little bit on top. But oh no, what else I was gonna do with the rest of this little sheet, or well, just parts of it at least, I'm just gonna cut out little sections. Again, just the rougher the better, but as long as you can still kind of tell that it's a mesh shape, and you know, they can be pretty small. And you can just glue them down in areas and like sticking out of bits of the rubble. And that bit just fell because I'm clumsy as hell. So this is what we have now. Again, it doesn't look pretty, and on camera especially you can't really tell what the effect is, but this is a lot more damage than I did in my previous little display base. That one just had a little small section, but this one is most of it is like textured, destroy building surfaces. Since I am gonna be doing you know, like a natural scenery sort of area in here with like, you know, trees and like just basically a park, I figured that I should probably do like a little make a little enclosure for that, sort of mark it out where it's going to be before this dries, because I wanted to make like a little path, not path, but like a fence out of toothpicks, whoops, well, matchsticks. So you can get like a big bag of these from craft stores. Like I got this one from a craft store, it was on sale, so it was, I don't know, like $2 or something. But normally they do cost a little more, but you know, these can be very useful for this type of build. So now we just have a little fence there, and inside that bit is where we're going to start to put like a park. So this base is going to be a lot less gray than the last one, the test one that I showed you guys. But you don't have to put a park in this. You can just paint it all gray concrete and just do what we're going to do in this episode without adding those. So yeah, again, I'm gonna cut back when that's done. So I've left this to dry for a couple of hours, and as you can see now it's all nice and dried, and you can really feel the sort of nice texture in there. So just give you guys a little look at that. Hopefully you can see all right. I prefer filming during the day because then I have actual natural light, which always looks the best. But for now, this should do. So you can get a good sense of what's there. Well, all the stuff we've done. You can see all the. What looks really good is like the coffee mixture. You see that on the right there, that gray coffee mixture with the gap filler. It turned into like a really nice. You can already see how that texture turned out in the gray color. So it's turned out really nice. So I'm really happy with the way this turned out. But what we're going to do now, and normally if I was actually sort of building this from, if I was doing this like the proper way, then I would do what I'm going to do here for the natural scenery stuff. I'd do that first. But seeing as how, and then I'd, you know, paint everything at the end. But seeing as how I'm doing it in separate episodes where I'm going to be filling in this space here with like the trees and the dirt and all of that sort of stuff to give a, you know, natural scenery type look. I'm going to do that bit later. So I'm going to kind of, I'm going to paint most of this stuff, but then when I put in the scenery, I'm going to go back in and kind of blend the two. So it's like the city destruction kind of fell into the natural park scenery that we're going to have in here. But I'm going to paint everything right now. So I have now painted all of this. So this is just the base colors. So this of course is a nice lighter gray where the, you know, just the regular concrete will be, and you can put your buildings down on here or whatever you want. And I've left the middle, I've painted just sort of just inside the road area here, because we don't really know how wide the road's exactly going to be, so you're going to see a little bit of this. But this This area I've left bare because we're gonna put the roads over that, so don't need the glue there. Well, I mean the glue's gonna go there, so you don't need the paint there. I've also painted the edges here. They're all painted gray. Don't have to do that, but I thought it'll just make it look a bit nicer when it's all said and done. And I painted, well, this bit I also painted inside this little matchstick sort of space we built here. I've just kind of gone over whatever paint I had left after painting this and just sort of painted that really roughly, because this area in the next episode is what we're going to be focusing on, and we're going to be building you know, a natural landscape, like a little park in here. But the destruction section, you can now see it's really come together. It's nowhere near finished. Well, it's actually pretty close to finished, but we still got some painting to do on it. It's just painted black. So you can see it right there. I had to go over it a few times, and there's still a couple of white spots in there, I think. It could just be glare, or because it's sort of shiny paint. I prefer matte paint, but I don't really have any fully matte black paint on hand. But what we're gonna do now, and it's gonna be probably the most fun part of this build, apart from, you know, just globbing on bits of ruined destruction and arranging that was pretty fun. But what we're gonna do now is with this, with what we have here, it still looks like, in person it looks a little better than on screen right now. But what we're gonna do now is we're gonna start to dry brush this and sort of incorporate it with some of the lighter colors, like the gray here, and that'll really bring out all this texture and all the little bits of mesh and stuff in here, and all the bits of cracked plaster and everything. It's gonna just start to really bring that all out. So we've got some paint that I mixed up earlier. I don't know if it's still any good, because it's been sitting here for like a full day while I left that to dry while I was doing other stuff. But hopefully we can use that, and we may just mix up some new paint not long after. So all the essential things you'll need. First of all, you'll need coffee, if you're doing this as early in the morning as I am. It's like just after 6 a.m. And brushes and paint. So just water-based acrylic again. But you can use really any paint you want. Like if you want to go crazy and use oil paint, I mean, more power to you. But you have to wait while that stuff dries, is the thing. So I don't have much working space here, and you've seen how clumsy I was earlier on when I was doing the coffee thing, so I don't really want to knock over this water. It's one of my fears. So I just got this dark gray color now. We're gonna, since this is dry brush black, we're gonna start going into it from the darker colors to the lighter colors. It's this gray color here that we're using now. So what I'm gonna do is, since this bit doesn't really matter, I'm just gonna kind of have this as like our area where because normally with dry brushing I'd like either scrape it off in the palette or wherever, but since this is our first layer and it's fairly dark, it doesn't matter too much if it's not even dry brush, but just straight painted on. But again, you don't want watery paint for this, is the basic idea, because you want some of the black to show through after you put the gray paint on, and that way that's going to create more depth, and it's gonna have all the little bits that are coming to the surface, or just the details in all these little bits of cracked, damaged bits show through, while everything that's sunk down deeper is gonna be hidden in the black. and that way you're going to get a lot of nice dynamic textures coming through. So that's what our rubble looks like at the moment. I've just put a light on it just to kind of get some more shadows in there for you guys to see, because this stuff looks the best when you got some lighting in a slightly different direction as I have it, like from the side, so you get some more intense shadows. It definitely looks a lot cooler. But what I'm gonna do now is I can get rid of that light. Now we're ready to do probably the most fun little bit here, which will be the lighter color dry brushing, because this is what really makes this brings this color to life, I find. So we get our brush, just make sure it's fairly dry, and I'm just gonna start it somewhere here. And basically what that is gonna do is that is gonna make everything come together. As you can see there, stuff is really starting to pop out. Again, I'd say it looks better in person than it does in these shots here, especially when you got, like I said, good lighting. I have like very diffused lighting over this, so there's no real shadows or anything sort of giving this this texture like more of a sculptural three-dimensional shape. So it just kind of looks a little messy in the pictures that you're seeing, but in person, where I'm sitting, the light is coming from behind the camera going forward, so it's kind of backlit, so it has all this cool shapes, cool shape in it. So again, when you start dry brushing stuff like the mesh, it really brings it out. Like I just did some I did a little bit on that road, so you can start to see that it's starting to pop out a bit. Not completely just yet, but we're gonna go over it with a lighter color in a bit. Sometimes, if you even go over the rubble in a lighter color than the rest of the gray, like it kind of is around here, it can kind of look cool, because it kind of it can be like when, you know, a building falls to rubble, it tends to like crumble and release like lots of dust and powder and crushed concrete, and that stuff generally isn't darker than, is generally a very light powder, like a very light gray. Don't ask me how I know that, but so I think you guys will really enjoy this step, because dry brushing really is quite fun, because for a minimum amount of effort, because it's super easy, you pretty much just mindlessly rub your brush all over the rubble section, and it just kind of brings it out and looks good. So you can see that definitely does look like some sort of rubble. Like a building was totally obliterated and the ground's been cracked and raised up and pushed out of the ground, and then the whole building was basically like dragged across the road there. It looks like it looks like a kaiju just ran either like kicked the building through this way and it crumbled over here, or walked through here, or whatever you want. The kind of the idea behind this is you can make different arrangements around this and add different accessories to kind of give different effects, but you can definitely see this is pretty much what you want to see in like a destroyed rubble type building. You can also definitely see I added some browns in there. I added some there on the road, but then I figured I might as well, you know, add some in and amongst all of this area, just to sort of represent any dirt that would have definitely been kicked up and brought to the surface when whatever calamity took place created all this rubble. So we're down to the last step of this video now, and that is the roads. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna figure out how these roads go. So I'm sorry if you can hear any background noise. Some idiots have decided to do the gardening at like 6-7 a.m. in the morning in the unit car park out front, so they're gonna be doing that for a while. So unfortunately there's nothing I can do about that, but got my knife, got my ruler, and we're just gonna cut our road So again, I brought this up many a time, but if you go on the Atomic Vinyl Reviews Facebook page, link in the description below. I'll have links probably directly to the specific photos as well in the description. So just go there, you'll find these photos, print them out on an 8x6" piece of glossy card from like an Office Works or whatever kind of printery shop you got near you. That's about that's exactly half an A4 size sheet of paper. And you'll get the exact same dimensions as I'm working with. So there's one. And there you see, now you have a nice road. So I'm just gonna double up on that because this is not gonna be long enough, but I'll just kind of show you that it does indeed fit. So that's what that's gonna look like when it's done. Then we're gonna put the other bit here and our other road trailing off from there. Now what I'm gonna do, kind of similar like when I was doing the cardboard, the ground cardboard, is I'm just gonna mark it off with a pencil. This time I can't really have I can't just flip over this base and cut these things using this as the ruler, because it's already got the rubble and everything's there, that stuff, so it's gonna get in the way if I try and flip it upside down. And I don't want to damage that stuff because we spent all that time dry brushing it and making it all fancy and nice. But what I'm just gonna do is just remove this top little triangle here, and that's gonna get us the right angle. Of course, if you did your road straight across, you wouldn't have to do this step, but I find that it looks really boring if it's kind of straight across, so on an angle it always is a little nicer. So then that'll fit perfectly. That's one done. To glue this down, I just can use any glue really, like any glue you want. I'm just going to use PVA. It's going to take a while to glue down, yes, but it'll work. And already that looks really nice, and I do recommend putting the cardboard on either side of the road, because having the road sink in just that tiny bit, just that separation with the road and the ground beside it, really is just a small detail that really adds a lot to it. Because if you just had the road sitting up above the ground, it would look kind of silly, I think, because the roads are usually sunk in as opposed to lifted up. So there's a nice bit of road. If you really wanted to, you could probably paint a road on. It would be very difficult with all the little details. That's why I opted for using a paper cutout. And speaking of paper cutouts, I dropped one of my roads. Okay, so this is where it gets a little interesting. Because we have this break in the road here, when we put this piece down, we're gonna have to cut it across where this break is, and we're gonna do that kind of roughly. We want this to be, you know, a broken bit of road. So there you go. You can see that there's the broken road, and you got the mesh coming under it, so it looks like some sort of what would you call it? Just like some sort of mesh that'll be under a road or whatever, to be like the just some metal support or something under there. And we're going to do the same thing for the rest of the road area. And this will be our final step for this episode. Thanks for checking out this episode, by the way, guys. I really hope you found it useful and you enjoy this content. If you like these videos, do let me know in the comments below, or message me on the Atomic Vinyl Reviews Facebook page or wherever. Just let me know what you think of these. Let me know if you have any ideas for future episodes, and like display ideas and stuff that you want me to show, because this stuff really is very fun to do. And like I said in the intro video to this series, building these dioramas and you know, miniature cities is very much in tune with just the history of Godzilla movies, and it's just such a rewarding experience, I find, when you get it really helps bring your collection to life, to have, you know, proper little setups for your figures to be in, because, you know, a figure is like just one part, just the actual monster is just sort of one part of like a movie scene. So if you've got everything else going in it, you get a really fantastic sort of scene. But there you go, there's your broken roads and your not so broken roads. And now you have a nice new display base. And again, this whole area here, we're gonna focus on that in another episode, where we're gonna do the natural scenery in there. But let's just we'll bring in some buildings just to close off this video and build a quick little display, so I can show you guys sort of what this would look like in its glory. So hopefully you enjoyed that tutorial and you found it really helpful. So here it is, the lovely sort of mock-up setup that I just did of a little display that you guys can do. So in our first episode we built this building, so that would have given you enough sort of ideas of how to build most of these buildings. And in the next episode we are probably going to be doing in the area just behind Godzilla here, we're probably going to be doing like a park and all that natural scenery. But in a coming episode we'll be doing some destroyed buildings like these. So hopefully you guys can stick around for those, and those will give you some cool ideas too. So yeah, basically, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and all that jazz. It really helps me out, and just any support for these tutorials on my channel in general will really help me and give me encouragement to do more of these sort of videos to help you guys out to make better and more awesome displays. So in the spirit of tokusatsu, just yeah, keep collecting, keep being awesome, guys, and yeah, may all your vinyl be irradiated vinyl. Over and out.